The massive viewing window of the Galactic Alliance headquarters stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a breathtaking view of swirling nebulae and distant stars. Captain Maya Patel stood before it, her reflection barely visible against the cosmic backdrop. She absently adjusted the collar of her Earth Defense Force uniform, a gesture that had become habit during these increasingly frequent Alliance meetings. "Captain Patel, the Council awaits." The voice belonged to a Centaurian aide, their crystalline form catching the starlight. Maya nodded, gathering her thoughts. 6 months had passed since Earth joined the Galactic Alliance, and still, every meeting felt like walking into a lion's den. The Alliance, a confederation of 37 spacefaring species, had welcomed humanity with what could generously be called polite skepticism. The Council chamber was a testament to advanced engineering, a perfect hemisphere with floating platforms arranged in concentric circles. Each platform hosted representatives from different species, their positions determined by their civilization's military might. Earth's platform, predictably, hovered near the bottom. High above, Supreme Commander Vorax of the Arcturian Empire leaned forward, his scaled face caught in the chamber's ambient light. "Captain Patel, your species continues to puzzle us. We have reviewed your military doctrine, and frankly, we find it concerning." Maya maintained her diplomatic posture, though her jaw tightened slightly. "What aspects concern you, Supreme Commander?" "Everything." The word boomed across the chamber. "Your ships prioritize defensive capabilities over offensive power. Your combat doctrine emphasizes retreat and regrouping over decisive engagement. Even your weapons systems focus on disruption rather than destruction. How do you expect to contribute to Alliance security with such timid approaches?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Arcturians, like most Alliance species, had evolved from apex predators. Their military doctrine was built around overwhelming force and direct confrontation. The concept of strategic withdrawal was practically blasphemous to them. "With respect, Supreme Commander," Maya replied, her voice steady. "Humanity's military development was shaped by our history. We learned that the strongest force isn't always the victorious one. Adaptation, innovation, and sometimes even retreat can be the most effective path to victory." A harsh laugh echoed from above. General Cathax of the Regelian Dominion. "Spoken like true prey species. Perhaps we should assign Earth's forces to guard our supply lines, where their cautious nature might actually prove useful." Maya felt her cheeks burn, but years of diplomatic training kept her voice level. "We would be happy to demonstrate the effectiveness of our approaches in joint exercises." The chamber's emergency lights suddenly flashed crimson. A holographic display materialized in the chamber center, showing the galaxy's outer rim. 3 Alliance outposts, represented by pulsing blue dots, winked out simultaneously. "Report," Vorax demanded. A military officer rushed in, their 4 arms working multiple data spheres. "Supreme Commander, we've lost contact with outposts 17, 18, and 19 in the Carina sector. No distress signals, no weapons signatures. They're just gone." The chamber erupted in fierce debate. The warrior species immediately called for a retaliatory strike, while others demanded increased defensive measures. Maya stood silent, studying the holographic display. Something about the attack pattern tickled her memory, a lecture from her academy days about historical naval warfare on Earth. "If I may," she spoke up, her voice barely carrying over the chaos. Few noticed until Vorax raised a hand for silence, more out of curiosity than respect. "The attack pattern," Maya continued, walking toward the hologram. "These outposts weren't chosen randomly. Look at their positions relative to nearby gravitational wells and sensor coverage. These attacks were precisely calculated to create a blind spot in our detection network." "What are you suggesting, Captain?" Vorax's tone carried a hint of genuine interest beneath its usual condescension. "On Earth, we studied historical naval tactics. This pattern resembles old submarine warfare strategies. Striking from stealth, creating gaps in enemy surveillance, then exploiting those gaps for larger incursions. Maya manipulated the hologram, highlighting several nearby systems. If I'm right, these systems will be the next targets. General Cathak scoffed. Preposterous. No race would waste time with such elaborate schemes when direct force would suffice. Perhaps, Maya replied quietly, that's precisely what makes this enemy so dangerous. They're not following conventional military logic. They're fighting smart, not just strong. Before anyone could respond, the emergency lights flashed again. 2 more outposts had gone dark, both in systems Maya had highlighted. The chamber fell silent. Vorax studied Maya with new intensity. Captain Patel, it seems your unconventional perspective might prove valuable after all. You will join the emergency response team. Perhaps it's time we learn more about humanity's approach to warfare. As Maya left the chamber, she caught her reflection in a polished wall. The same nervous habit made her reach for her collar, but this time she stopped herself. Perhaps humanity's perceived weakness, their caution, their flexibility, their willingness to think differently, might prove to be exactly what the Alliance needed. In her quarters that evening, Maya reviewed the attack data. More patterns emerged, each more troubling than the last. Whatever they were facing wasn't interested in glory or conquest. It was methodical, patient, and learning. She opened a channel to Earth Command. They needed to prepare. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity's timid approach to warfare had helped them survive their own bloody history. And perhaps, she thought as she watched distant stars through her viewport, it would help them all survive what was coming. The holographic display in the Alliance Emergency Command Center painted the room in an eerie blue glow. Captain Maya Patel stood among the gathered military leaders, watching as another cluster of outposts vanished from the map. 3 weeks had passed since the first attacks, and the situation had only grown more dire. 17 outposts. Supreme Commander Vorax growled, his scaled hands clenched into fists. 17 outposts lost without a single captured enemy ship, without a single meaningful sensor reading. Maya studied the latest disappearances. Each attack followed the same pattern, precise, methodical, and completely silent. No distress calls, no debris fields, no radiation signatures. It was as if the outposts simply ceased to exist. The Dreadnought fleet stands ready, General Kthax announced, mandibles clicking with anticipation. Give the word, and we'll flood every targeted sector with enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. Maya couldn't stay silent any longer. And what exactly would you be firing at, General? The chamber grew quiet. Kthax turned all 4 of his eyes toward her. Explain yourself, human. We've deployed sensor nets, patrol fleets, and automated drones, Maya said, manipulating the holographic display. Nothing. Whatever we're facing doesn't show up on our scans. They're either using technology far beyond our understanding, or what? Vorax demanded. Or we're looking for the wrong things. Maya pulled up data from the latest attack. We're searching for engine signatures, weapon emissions, gravitational distortions, all the standard markers of advanced spacefaring civilization. But what if our enemy doesn't use any of those? She highlighted a section of sensor data that most had dismissed as background noise. Look at these quantum fluctuations. They're subtle, barely above normal space-time variance, but they appear at every attack site exactly 17 minutes before each outpost goes dark. A theoretician from the Vega Consensus floated forward, their ethereal form rippling with interest. Impossible. No known species can manipulate quantum fields with such precision. No known species, Maya emphasized. We're dealing with something new, something that doesn't fight the way we expect advanced civilizations to fight. She brought up historical footage from Earth's oceans. On our world, we have creatures called cephalopods, soft-bodied organisms that can change their color and texture to match any background. They don't rely on hard shells or powerful muscles for survival. They adapt, they hide, they strike only when success is certain. The display shifted to show the pattern of outpost disappearances. Our enemy is behaving the same way. They're not interested in glorious battles or displays of force. They're hunting. A primitive analogy, Kathak scoffed, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Perhaps, Maya conceded, but primitive doesn't mean wrong. Every attempt to detect or engage this enemy through conventional means has failed. We need to change our approach. She highlighted several sectors on the map. Based on the attack pattern and these quantum fluctuations, I believe they're building towards something. Each lost outpost creates another blind spot in our defense network. They're systematically dismantling our ability to detect them, like a predator slowly surrounding its prey. Vorax leaned forward, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by grim consideration. What do you propose, Captain? Stop trying to fight them directly. Instead, let's study them, learn their patterns, set traps rather than mounting attacks. Maya brought up a tactical proposal she'd been developing. We modify a small group of outposts with quantum sensors tuned to these specific fluctuations, make them appear vulnerable, but fill them with monitoring equipment rather than weapons. Use our outposts as bait. Kathax sounded outrage. Let them be destroyed just to gather data. No, Maya corrected. Make them look like easy targets, but hide our real surveillance systems in ways the enemy won't expect. If they're as adaptive as I think they are, they'll detect any obvious sensors. So we hide our monitoring equipment in ways that mimic natural phenomena. She displayed designs for sensor buoys disguised as space debris and quantum detectors masked as stellar radiation. On Earth, we learned that sometimes the best way to understand a predator is to let it think it's successfully hunting you. The room erupted in debate. The warrior races were predictably opposed to such a passive approach, but others, particularly the more scientifically minded species, showed interest. Vorax raised a hand for silence. Your suggestion goes against every principle of Alliance military doctrine, Captain Patel. He paused, mandibles twitching. But our doctrine hasn't worked so far. You have 3 outposts to test your theory. If you're wrong, if we lose them for nothing. I understand, sir. Maya straightened. But if I'm right, we'll finally learn what we're really facing. 2 days later, Maya stood in her command center, surrounded by specially modified monitoring equipment. 3 outposts had been prepared according to her specifications, each one appearing vulnerable, while hiding a sophisticated web of quantum sensors. Quantum fluctuations detected in Sector 7, a technician announced. Signature matches previous attacks. Maya watched the readings with intense focus. Now we'll see what's really out there, and maybe learn why they're hunting us. The quantum fluctuations grew stronger. On conventional sensors, nothing appeared unusual, but Maya's modified equipment painted a different picture. Strange distortions in space-time, moving with deliberate purpose. By the stars, someone whispered as the first clear images began to form. What they saw would change everything they thought they knew about warfare in space. The hunters had finally begun to reveal themselves, and Maya couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's greatest test was just beginning. What are we looking at? Supreme Commander Vorax's voice was barely a whisper as he stared at the holographic display. The images captured from Maya's modified sensors showed something that defied conventional understanding. The enemy vessels, if they could be called vessels, appeared as shifting masses of crystalline structures that seemed to exist partially out of phase with normal space-time. They didn't so much fly through space as flow through it, their forms constantly adapting and changing. We're calling them the flux, Maya explained, manipulating the display to show multiple angles. They appear to be some form of crystalline collective consciousness capable of manipulating quantum fields at will. Each ship is actually a colony of smaller entities working in perfect synchronization. The data from Maya's trap outposts had revealed more than just the enemy's appearance. It showed how they operated, how they thought, and most importantly, why conventional military tactics had failed so spectacularly against them. The flux don't just adapt to attacks, she continued, playing footage from one of the outpost captures. They absorb energy and information from everything they encounter. Every weapon fired at them, Every scan performed on them teaches them more about us while making them stronger. General Cathax clicked his mandibles in frustration. Then we hit them with everything at once, overwhelmed their ability to adapt. As if in answer to his suggestion, emergency alerts blared throughout the command center. The main display shifted to show a massive fleet engagement in progress. The Rigelian Assault Force, pride of the Alliance military, had encountered a large concentration of flux vessels. Maya's heart sank as she watched the battle unfold. The Rigelian ships, each a masterpiece of conventional military engineering, opened fire with their most powerful weapons. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes crossed the void of space, striking the flux formations. At first, it seemed Cathax's approach might work. Several flux vessels appeared to destabilize under the barrage. But then something horrifying happened. The damaged flux beings began to merge, their crystalline structures reorganizing into larger, more complex forms. Each new configuration incorporated aspects of the weapons used against them. Pull them back, Maya urged, but it was too late. The transformed flux entities launched a counterattack, using modified versions of the Alliance's own weapons. The Rigelian fleet's shields, calibrated to defend against known energy signatures, proved useless against these adapted attacks. In less than 20 minutes, the most powerful combat fleet in the Alliance was reduced to drifting debris. Over 30,000 of the Alliance's finest warriors gone. The command center fell silent. Even Cathax had no words. Now do you understand? Maya's voice was gentle but firm. We can't beat them with brute force. Every direct confrontation makes them stronger, more adaptable, more dangerous. We need to think differently. Vorax turned to her, his earlier skepticism replaced by desperate hope. What do you propose, Captain? Maya activated another display, showing a new tactical proposal. We stop trying to destroy them. Instead, we need to disrupt their ability to adapt and communicate. She brought up detailed scans of the flux's quantum field interactions. Look here, their consciousness exists in a quantum state, allowing for instant communication and adaptation. But quantum states are notoriously fragile. She highlighted specific frequencies in the data. We create quantum noise generators, devices that produce random quantum fluctuations on exactly the right frequencies to interfere with their collective consciousness. Not enough to harm them directly, but enough to create confusion and disorder in their ranks. Like static in a communication channel, one of the technical advisors noted, beginning to understand. Exactly, Maya confirmed. But that's just the first step. While they're disrupted, we introduce conflicting information into their adaptation processes. False data, contradictory energy patterns, nonsensical tactical responses. We don't try to overpower them. We try to confuse them. She brought up simulations showing her proposed strategy. Small, fast ships equipped with quantum disruptors and variable energy emitters. Hit-and-run tactics, never staying in one place long enough for them to adapt. Each attack doesn't try to destroy them, just feed them contradictory information that makes it harder for them to form coherent responses. Fighting without fighting, Vorax mused, beginning to see the elegance of the approach. In human history, some of our most effective military strategies involve making the enemy defeat themselves, Maya explained. We're not physically weaker than the flux. We're just different. And maybe that difference is exactly what we need. The room erupted in discussion as military leaders and scientists began to grasp the implications of Maya's strategy. For the first time since the crisis began, there was a glimmer of hope. A junior officer rushed into the command center. Captain Patel, we're detecting new flux activity in sectors 12 through 15. They're massing for something big. Maya studied the tactical display, her mind already racing with possibilities. Then it's time to show them why humanity's supposed weakness might be our greatest strength. Prepare the first wave of quantum disruptors. We're about to teach the flux a lesson about the power of fighting smarter, not harder. The Alliance was about to go to war in a way none of its warrior races had ever imagined. And humanity, the species they had dismissed as cowardly, would lead the way. Operation Whisper began not with a bang, but with silence. Maya watched from the bridge of her command ship as the first wave of human-designed vessels moved into position. Unlike the massive warships of the Alliance races, these were small, stealthy craft that barely registered on sensors. Each one carried a suite of quantum disruption equipment and specialized electronic warfare systems. Remember, Maya's voice carried across the encrypted command channel. We're not trying to win battles. We're creating chaos. The flux had gathered in force, their crystalline forms creating strange, beautiful patterns against the backdrop of space. Traditional Alliance commanders would have seen an irresistible target. Maya saw an opportunity. First wave, initiate protocol battle. The human ships activated their quantum disruptors, each one operating on slightly different frequencies. The effect on the flux was immediate and stunning. Their perfectly synchronized movements began to falter as quantum static interfered with their collective consciousness. Second wave, commence Operation Echo. Another group of ships emerged from hiding, these ones broadcasting carefully crafted false sensor data. The information was designed to trigger the flux's adaptation responses, but each ship transmitted different, contradictory data. Through her command display, Maya watched the flux entities try to adapt. But instead of forming larger, more powerful configurations as they had against the Rigelian fleet, they began shifting erratically. Some tried to adapt to energy weapons that didn't exist, while others reconfigured to defend against phantom attacks. Like giving someone 5 different maps to the same city, Maya explained to the Alliance observers on her bridge, each one showing different streets and landmarks. They can't adapt effectively because they don't know what's real anymore. The flux formations, normally so precise and coordinated, began to break apart. Individual entities moved in conflicting directions, their adaptation responses working against each other. Third wave, execute Protocol Mirage. The final group of ships moved in, using modified tractor beams to subtly influence the flux's movements. Not enough to be detected as an attack, but enough to guide confused entities into collision courses with each other. Supreme Commander Vorax, watching from his command ship, shook his head in amazement. They're defeating themselves, and we've barely fired a shot. Sometimes the strongest weapon is confusion, Maya replied. The flux rely on perfect information and coordination. We're giving them neither. The strategy was working better than even Maya had hoped. Without their unified consciousness to guide them, individual flux entities began exhibiting almost primitive responses. Some tried to retreat, others attempted to attack phantom targets, and many simply drifted, their adaptation systems overwhelmed by contradictory input. But Maya knew better than to celebrate too early. They're learning, she warned, noting subtle changes in the flux's behavior patterns. Begin phase rotation. All ships shift frequencies and tactics according to randomized schedule data. This was the key to the human strategy, constant change. Every time the flux began to adapt to one form of disruption, the human ships would switch to different frequencies and patterns, forcing them to start the adaptation process all over again. Captain, one of her sensor operators called out, "We're detecting unusual energy signatures from the larger flux formations. They're trying to communicate with us." Maya leaned forward, studying the readings. The flux were indeed attempting to broadcast some form of signal through the quantum static. It wasn't an attack pattern. It was too regular, too deliberate. They're intelligent, she realized. Not just adaptive, but truly conscious. And we've just shown them something they've never encountered before. An enemy they can't simply absorb and overcome. The signal grew stronger, taking on a clear pattern. Maya made a bold decision. Reduce quantum disruption in Sector 7 by 30%. Let's see what they're trying to say. Through the carefully maintained gap in the interference, a message began to form. Not in words or conventional signals, but in mathematical patterns that any spacefaring race would recognize. Prime numbers, geometric sequences, the building blocks of communication. "They want to talk," Maya announced, her voice filled with wonder. We didn't just confuse them. We impressed them. They'd never encountered a species that could challenge them without raw force. The Alliance observers muttered among themselves. The warrior races had always seen dialogue as a last resort of the weak. But here was an enemy that could shrug off their mightiest weapons, being brought to the negotiating table by humanity's cowardly tactics. Should we respond? Vorax asked, mandibles twitching uncertainly. Maya allowed herself a small smile. That was always the goal, wasn't it? Not to destroy them, but to make them understand that there are other ways to resolve conflicts. She began composing a response in the same mathematical language the Flux had used. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in defeating your enemy, but in turning them into something other than an enemy. As the first exchange of mathematical signals began, Maya reflected on how far they'd come. The Alliance had dismissed humans as weak, as cowards who relied on technology and trickery rather than strength and courage. But in the end, it was precisely those qualities, human ingenuity, caution, and the willingness to seek alternatives to violence, that had achieved what brute force could not. The Flux were still dangerous, still powerful, but now they were something else too, curious. And curiosity, Maya knew from human history, was often the first step toward understanding. 3 months after first contact with the Flux, the Alliance Council chamber looked very different. Where once representatives had been arranged by military might, now they sat in a circle of equals. And among them, shimmering in controlled quantum states, were the first Flux ambassadors. Maya stood at the center of the chamber, presenting her final report on what had become known as the Quantum Dialogue Initiative. Behind her, holographic displays showed the remarkable progress made since that first mathematical exchange. The Flux, we've learned, are a species that evolved in the quantum foam between dimensions, she explained. Their entire civilization is built on the principle of adaptation and growth through absorption of knowledge. What we initially saw as attacks were actually their traditional form of first contact. The chamber was silent as Maya continued. They didn't understand that their method of learning, direct absorption of energy and information, was destructive to our form of life. They had never encountered beings who couldn't simply reconfigure themselves to survive the process. A Flux ambassador pulsed in agreement, their crystalline form casting rainbow patterns across the chamber. Through the quantum translators Maya's team had developed, its thoughts reached everyone present. We saw your weapons, your rigid ships, as signs of primitive development, the Flux communicated. In our experience, true advancement meant transcending fixed forms. We did not recognize that your apparent limitations were actually choices, conscious decisions to remain in forms that allowed for something we had never considered, individual perspectives. Maya nodded, remembering the breakthrough moment when they had finally understood each other. The Flux's greatest strength was their unity, perfect communication, perfect adaptation. But it was also their greatest weakness. They had never experienced the creative power of different viewpoints, of disagreement, of the need to find solutions that worked for diverse groups. Your species, another Flux ambassador added, showed us that there is strength in what we perceived as weakness. Your divided nature, your need to communicate across differences, your ability to cooperate despite imperfect understanding. These are not flaws. They are advantages we had never imagined. Supreme Commander Vorax, his once dismissive attitude completely transformed, addressed the chamber. We too have learned this lesson. We dismissed humans as weak because they preferred caution to confrontation, communication to combat. We were wrong. General Cathax, who had once mocked humanity's military doctrine, spoke next. The humans' approach to the Flux crisis has revolutionized our understanding of strength. They showed us that true power lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to know when not to. Maya brought up new displays showing joint human Flux research projects. The Flux's ability to manipulate quantum states, combined with our experience in bridging differences, has opened up possibilities we never imagined. We're learning to communicate across dimensional barriers, to understand forms of life we never knew existed. The holographic displays showed experimental ships designed with flux principles, vessels that could adapt to new situations without losing their essential nature. We're not just sharing technology, Maya explained. We're sharing perspectives, teaching each other new ways of seeing the universe. A younger flux entity, one of the first to be born since first contact, demonstrated their latest achievement. Instead of the chaotic absorption of information that had characterized their species, it showed controlled, selective adaptation, learning without destroying. The humans taught us restraint. The young flux communicated. They showed us that sometimes the greatest growth comes not from taking, but from listening. Maya felt a profound sense of satisfaction as she concluded her report. A year ago, I stood in this chamber and heard humanity dismissed as cowards, as weaklings who relied on technology and trickery rather than strength. Today, I stand here to say that those very qualities, our caution, our creativity, our willingness to find alternatives to force, have not just saved lives. They've opened up new horizons for all our species. The chamber erupted in agreement, a chorus of voices both organic and quantum unified in appreciation of how far they'd come. The alliance had changed. The rigid hierarchy of military might had given way to a more nuanced understanding of strength. As Maya looked around the chamber, she saw the future taking shape. Humans worked alongside former warrior races, teaching them the art of subtle strategy. Flux entities collaborated with alliance scientists, showing them new ways to perceive reality. And throughout it all ran a common thread, the recognition that true strength comes in many forms. Perhaps, Maya reflected, addressing the chamber one final time, this is humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy. Not our technology, not our tactics, but our understanding that power isn't always about being the strongest or the most aggressive. Sometimes, the greatest strength lies in being willing to be seen as weak, in choosing patience over power, in finding ways to turn potential enemies into friends. The flux ambassador beside her pulsed in agreement, its crystalline form synchronizing briefly with her quantum translator in a gesture of friendship. Together, they represented a future neither of their species could have imagined a year ago, a future built not on force, but on understanding. And in the depths of space, where Alliance ships now patrolled alongside flux entities, that future was already taking shape, one careful, considered step at a time.